Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to wrap up Unit 5 by looking at long-run production cost. So the key here, starting out, is this idea of long-run versus short-run. So remember, in the long run, all resources are variable, which means we have the time to change any resource that we want, whether it be something easy to change, like the number of workers, or something harder to change, like the number of factories, right? So that's the idea of long run, right? Being able to change all of our resources. And so the question is, like, why does this distinction matter? And the answer has to do with the fact that we can get something called increasing returns to scale. So companies like Walmart do this really well. That as you are becoming more efficient, you're adopting, say, mass production techniques. Think Henry Ford in the assembly line and being able to assemble cars faster. You're able to spread your cost over a lot of output, right? Because remember that average total cost, in this case, we're going to look at long run average total cost because we're in the long run, is total cost divided by Q. Well, if you're really, really productive over the long run, you can change all of your resources. You can make Q really, really big. And so by comparison, your average cost per unit of output is going to get really, really small, right? Well, when we're talking about increasing returns to scale, we're talking about increasing that production. So increasing returns to scale means that if I increase my inputs by, some percentage point, X percent, my output would increase by more than X percent, right? So if my inputs are increasing by 50%, my output's increasing by 70%, 80%, 90%, right? And so I'm gonna be able to make Q a heck of a lot bigger, and in doing so, I'm gonna bring down my long run average total cost. So that's the idea. When we talk about scale, we're talking about getting bigger. In the long run, you can do that because you have this flexibility with all of your resources. Now, if you're not quite as productive, or you've been in business long enough, you've scaled up enough, you get to what's called constant returns to scale. And this actually has two different meanings. We're going to get to the other meaning in a minute. But for now, it means that if I increase my inputs by, X percent, then I'm going to increase my output by X percent, right? So it's constant. If I increase my inputs by 50%, my output increases by 50%. And most businesses over the long run are eventually going to operate in this range, right? Where, you get out what you put in. 50% more input, 50% more output, okay? And then finally, there's, as I'm sure you've guessed, decreasing returns to scale. I'm not going to write out returns to scale. I think you get it by now. So this would be the idea that if you increase your inputs by X percent, you are going to increase, you'll still increase your output, but by less than X percent, right? So I'm actually not getting as much out of my resources as I should be. 50% increase in inputs, only a 20% increase in output. The reason for this is that when companies get really, really, really big, they get harder and harder to manage, and so inefficiency creeps in. Think about, when I said ratatouille in the restaurant in a previous video, I said, when Linguini comes in, has nothing to do, right? Now, it is true that in the long run, there is the law of diminishing marginal returns doesn't really apply because you have complete flexibility of your resources, but that doesn't mean that waste and efficiency can't creep in and cause you to have decreasing returns to scale. So that deals with the production side of long-run production costs. But what about the cost side? With the cost side, we get to something that's called economies of scale. And so what economies of scale is, it's the idea that if your output is increasing, your long-run average total cost is decreasing. Okay, and so basically this is the result of increasing returns to scale, that you have economies of scale. Your costs are falling over the long run on average as you're producing more output. You're so productive, you're so efficient that you're bringing your costs down because each worker is contributing so much more to your bottom line than it's costing you to hire that worker or use that tool or whatever the case may be. So that's economies of scale. Now, this gets a little confusing because another scenario you can have is what's called constant returns to scale. And it's the same wording, but instead of meaning, double inputs, double outputs, what it means here in this context with cost is that if I increase my output, my long run average total cost does not change. And I want to stress here that, again, this is all about the long run, okay? This does not apply to short run average total cost or any of the other short run production curves or any other long run production curves. This is all about long run ATC. So remember that. So constant returns to scale in the cost context, my output increases, my long run average total cost stays the same. And then finally, the other side of this is diseconomies of scale. So with diseconomies of scale, this is the nightmare scenario for a business. Your output's increasing, and so is your cost. And to be honest with you, most businesses are going to operate in this range, right? Like, you're going to produce more output, and it's going to cost you more to do it. You're going to get to a point where you can only squeeze so much out of your workers, only so much out of your business that waste and efficiency creeps in, and it's going to actually cost you more to produce those additional units of output, and so you have diseconomies of scale. Now, if we were to graph this for economies of scale, we could do something like this. The shape of long run ATC is just like ATC. It's the same shape. And so in red here, this would be economies of scale, EOS. And then on the other side, this would be diseconomies of scale, DOS. And then the bottom in green here would be constant returns to scale, CRS. Okay? So you are not going to have to draw long-run average total cost, but you do need to be able to recognize where do we have economies of scale, lower levels of output, where long-run ATC is falling, constant returns to scale, constant LRATC, diseconomies of scale, rising long-run average total cost. So that's all for this video on long-run production costs. Until next time, have a great day.